Welcome to the online lectures for information security. In today's class, we'll be discussing the topic quantitative versus qualitative risk control practice. In the previous class, we have studied how you're going to select a specific risk control practice. In today's class, we'll be studying two different practices, quantitative and qualitative. Now, first, we'll study what are these two, qualitative and quantitative. So coming on to the first one, that is the qualitative risk assessment. Now, this qualitative risk assessment, it is based upon subjective qualities that are assigned to each risk. Now, what are the different subjective qualities? The subjective qualities, it can be low, medium, or high. Any risk that might occur within a system, that can be low risk, it can be a medium, or it can be a high risk. Now, this is going to indicate their merit or otherwise in relation to each other. So you'll get to know how the risk is affecting a specific entity. This is called as your qualitative risk assessment. Now, within this subjective rating, there are a few things that you need to take into account so that you can identify this low, medium, and high categories. You need to keep into mind here, it takes into account the different strengths, the different weaknesses, the different opportunities, and the different threats that the organization is facing. When you have all this information, you can categorize the different types of risks based upon their subjective qualities. Now, this subjective risk assessment, it is faster and less expensive, and it is undertaking than a quantitative assessment. Now, it is faster and less expensive. We'll see this in comparison with the quantitative risk assessment. Now, this qualitative risk assessment, this is more commonly used by different enterprises that are looking to minimize their budgets because this is faster and it is less expensive. So as your qualitative risk assessment. Now coming on to the next one. Now the next one is your quantitative risk assessment. Now this quantitative risk assessment, it brings numbers into the equation that it is going to make it more accurate, with analysis that is based upon the likelihood of that particular threat is going to manifest and the predetermined measurement scales used to establish the risk or losses associated with those threats. Now, when you have the value of each and every asset, what are the different probability of the risk values, that is, when you put all the numbers within the equation, you will get to know what are the different threats, how much loss might incur when when a particular asset is being attacked. You have exact accurate numbers. That is why it is called as your quantitative risk assessment. Now the aim of this quantitative risk assessment, it is that it is basically it is associating a financial amount, that is this much money you might use. It is associating a financial amount to each risk. Then you will get to know how much loss a particular enterprise or a particular organization is going to face. So if you get to know that there's an attack that is going to breach an organization, or this assessment might be compromised, you will get to know what is going to be your financial impact of this particular incident. You'll get to know exact value. Now, this quantitative assessment is the most thorough method of performing a risk analysis. Now, why it is thorough? Because it is bringing all the numbers in here, the exact value, the value of your information. Then what is the value, what is the worth of your information? Then if this is compromised, how much loss is being incurred? That can happen. So this is the most expensive, because it is not easy to identify what is the value of each and different, what are the different values of asset, what is the likelihood of the risk to, what is the likelihood of an attack that is going to violate the vulnerabilities of a system. And then when you're estimating all the numbers, when you're focusing on numbers, it is going to take a lot of time. So this becomes time consuming also. As this is time consuming, it is most expensive, this is ideally not the first choice of smaller enterprises. That is why that is that is why we've said that qualitative assessment is, it is faster and less expensive and undertaking than a quantitative assessment. That is, people go for qualitative assessment rather than going for quantitative risk assessment. Now, in this quantitative and qualitative assessment, you've got a topic that is called as benchmarking. Now, this is an alternative approach to risk management, or you can say here the cost benefit analysis. Now, within this, what is going to happen is that benchmarking is the process of seeking out or studying practices in other organizations that one own organization desired to duplicate. Now, whether it is like, instead of determining the financial value of each and every information like you've done within the quantitative risk assessment, you're not going to do that. You are not going to identify value of each and every information and then you're not going to implement security. Rather than that, what you're going to do is that you're going to look into the different organization. What are different other institutions doing to protect their own information? This process is called as benchmarking. What you're doing is you're basically studying what other organizations are doing to protect their own data. That process is called as benchmarking. Now, this define benchmarking you can get as in a short answer also. Now, one of the two measures that are used within benchmarking, there as metric based measures and you've got process based measures. Now, this metric based measures, these is basically comparison of different numerical standards. Metric based measure, they are based upon numerical standards, and this process based number, these are less number focused. Let's see what are these. The first one is metric based measure. Now, within this metric based measure, I've told that this is focused upon different numerical standards. Now, what are these numerical standards? These numerical standards, this can be the number of successful attacks or the different staff hours that are spent on a system protection. That is how many people are protecting the system around the clock, how many hours are put in for the protection. That, then how many dollars are spent on protection. So these are all numbers. This is going to give you all exact numbers. How many attacks are there? This can be 5, 10, 100 attacks within a year or month. Then staff hours, this is again going to be a numerical value. The dollars spent upon the protection, this is again going to be the number. Then you've got what are the estimated losses due to a successful attack. Now, within the first one, when you know how many attacks are there, based upon that, you can get to know how much loss was incurred by the particular enterprise. Then loss in productivity hours. Now, when is there going to be loss within this productivity hours? When there is an attack that was launched in an organization due to a successful attack. Now, the organization are going to use this type of information based upon their ranking and determining what a market is with like this size of a particular market. They determine how you're going to compare all of these values. Thus, you're going to have all the numerical values. So these values are used for similar types of businesses. Now, coming back to this process-based number. Now, this process-based number, as I told you, it is less number focused. Now, with less number focused, it means that it is not going to focus upon the different numbers. Here, it is going to focus upon different activities that are performed within an organization. It is going to focus upon different activities that a particular company is performing so that a goal can be achieved. Like what are different performance activities that are like their pursuit of its goals you're going to identify, rather than focusing on how these goals were attained. You're going to focus upon the process. As the name says, process. You're going to focus upon the different activities that a particular organization is implementing to safeguard their own information. That is your goal. So you're not going to focus upon what is the goal, you're going to focus upon how this goal is achieved. So this process is called as benchmarking. Now, within this benchmarking, you're also going to have like a few standards that are used within benchmarking. There is standard of due care and the standard of due diligence. Now, within the standard of due care and due diligence, now the standard of due care is when adopting different levels of security for a legal defense, organization shows it has done what any prudent organization would do in a similar circumstances. Now, we've studied that a benchmarking process is that you're studying. Basically what you're doing is you're studying different institutions, or you can say different organizations, what they're doing to safeguard their information. Now when there is a legal defense, that is when there is a legal defense case that is being put on a particular enterprise or a particular organization. So here what happens is that organization is going to tell, as they are studying different techniques, standards that are implemented by other companies, they are going to tell that I have done the same thing that any other person might have done, or this company has done such and so thing. I have also done the same thing. Why am I facing a legal case? This is the standard of due care. Now why this? Now within this you might have telling that there is only a case within that particular care, that when you are focusing upon a specific activity that an organization is implementing, you're not just going to study it, implement it, and just you're not going to leave it. It is insufficient that you are just implementing it. The main thing is that when you apply a specific control, you are also going to maintain it. If within a legal case, if you just say that this organization is doing, why am I facing that other organization might have maintained the specific control, then you leave loopholes within the organization, or when this particular standard is not working well, they are either changing it or replicating, they are either changing it or they are making some updates within that software. You need to apply and you also need to maintain, then only security can be maintained. Whereas within due diligence, it is a demonstration that the organization is diligent in ensuring that implement standard is continuing to provide required level of protection. The second part of standard of due care is your due diligence, that you are also maintaining the protection of the information. Now, if you fail to support any type of due care or due diligence, then it is going to not give you the same level of protection and you might face some legal issues. Now here the other thing that you have in benchmarking is called the best business practices. Now this best business practices, this is a security effort that is going to use superior level of protection. Now the superior level of protection means it has got the best practices, or what are the best recommended practices. You're going to have the best of all practices, that is called as your best business practices. Now within this best business practices, you also have is a best security practice, that is BSP, best security practices. So you can have a small s here. So what are different best security practices? Now these best security practices, these are going to be the best within the industry, the best within the entire organization. It is going to balance all the needs of a particular organization with the best provide right protection. That is called as your BSPs. Now the best practices, these are also going to provide as much security as possible while also maintaining the same responsibility. That is maintenance of the software and sorry, with the security of your information system and the protection of your information. Now, when you consider the different best practices, what are going to be the best practices? There are a few things that you need to focus upon here are, does the organization resemble identified target with the best practice? That is, the first point here means that whether you're going to focus upon here that whether a specific organization structure is similar to the target. That is, when you have a specific goal, whether that is actually same or similar with the goal of other practices. If we take an example here, we can say that if there's a small organization, or we can say a small office, you've got a home office, the practices that are applied by a home office, they are not going to be appropriate for a multinational company. Practices for a home office, they are not appropriate for a multinational company. And the next one is, are resources at hand similar? Now, there are different resources at different level of organizations. Whether the resources that you have and the other organization have, whether they are similar or not, that is the main thing that you need to identify. You cannot implement a practice when the resources that are used by the other company, you do not own them, or you have some specific resources and the other company does not have those specific resources. So it is not useful to submit any best practices based upon the resources when they are different. The next is organization in a similar threat environment. Now, when you want to protect your organization, you're going to focus upon the threats that your organization has, the threat that your organization have, whether it is the same threat that the other organization is facing. If it is the same, then you can focus on continuing studying the practices and implementing them. If suppose the attacks that are formed or the threats that are completely different, then again there is no point. Now the next one is the problems with applying benchmarking with the best practices. Now the biggest problem within the benchmarking is that organizations do not talk to each other. Now, when you want to study another organization and there is some rivalry between two organizations, then it becomes very difficult for you to study their practices and even implement them. So this is your biggest problem. Then another problem is that no two organizations are identical. Now here, no organizations are identical. It means that you might have some different type of information. Now that type of information might require some different level of security, and the other organization, what type of data they have, they might require some other type of security. So organizations are not identical. So that is again the another problem. Then the third problem is that the best practices are a moving target. Now the, this means that if suppose there is some specific practice that worked well 2 years ago, that might be completely worthless for today's threats. What threats that you're facing now, that is not going to provide you any benefit when you study or the specific practices that were applied 2 years ago. One last issue to consider is that simply knowing what was going on a few years ago, as in benchmarking, doesn't necessarily tell you what to do next. So by studying all this, it is not going to tell you what you need to do next. You need to understand and apply and maintain all of these practices. Then the next one is baselining. Now this baselining, it is related to benchmark, that is called as baseline. Now what is this baselining? It is basically this baselining, it is going to provide you with a foundation of internal benchmarking. Now, what is this foundation of internal benchmarking? It means that within baselining, what you're going to do is that you're basically going to provide an analysis of the different measures and different standard that were established. Now, this is that it is baselining is the value of profit of a performance against the changes in the performance metric that can be usually compared. So you're going to compare the two things, that is the value of profit of a performance metric against the changes in the performance metric that can be usually compared. That is, you had some specific profit when you applied some specific control strategy. Then when you make changes within those specific control strategies, what is the changes between that specific metric? You're going to compare the two. Now, it is the comparison of security activities and events against the organization future performance. That is, if suppose there was a previous control that provide you some specific level of security. If you're making changes within these control, what is going to be the change within the future? How it is going to increase the security, how the performance is going to uh, increase, how the risks are going to reduce. This is going to be identified. This is called as baselining. Now, if we take an example of this, is you can tell that what are the number of attacks that are occurring within an organization within a particular week or within a particular month. Then making changes, how this is going to be reduced. You can compare those two different measures. Now with this, this is the end of today's class. Thank you.